Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can. And I continue with Tyranny, Blind. Now, if this sounds a little disjointed, it's because it's done through magic of editing. Later, I noticed the previous episode was way too long, so I cut it in half. Let's continue. So, that still leaves Ebb. Man, those conversations are pretty extensive, but I would like to wrap it up in this episode, at least for the time being. So let's talk to Ebb.
Salutations, Fatebinder. Or should I now call you Lord of Vendrian's Well? The Spire King? Prince of the suggestive vertical slab?
Well, my name will suffice.
So if I might ask, what is your plan now? The edict no longer looms overhead, and Kairos' conquest of the Tears seems to be slipping, what with the armies in civil war.
Well, I'd like to find others willing to follow me. We're definitely going to need a bigger army, even if we just want to fight Kairos to a standstill.
Kairos' armies made short work of the Tears. There's still plenty of anti-Kairos sentiment, but not a lot of folks with any fight left in them. But we have a few options. The classic option for a land war in the Tears is hiring Free City's mercenaries. Most of them were slain in the war, but the Bronze Brotherhood is still alive and strutting. They're stationed in Lethian's Crossing. The idea I was pitching to the Vendrian Guard. Let's arm every Beastman tribe that'll join us. The Stone Sea is home to a bevy of tribes that were freed during the war, and neither the Chorus nor the Disfavored can seem to tame them. If we really want to hate ourselves in the morning, Stalwart is pretty famous for not helping their neighbors, but also famous for being relentless at war. The Disfavored have their leadership surrounded, but the people in the storm-blasted countryside are still fighting. And while I don't endorse this, I must list all the options. The School of Ink and Quill. I'm sure there's some logic to working with them, just like there's some logic in cutting off your own head to prevent all future headaches.
What about less obvious options?
Well, the court has a guild of mages, the Forgebound, right? They are your peers, seeing as you're all legally sworn to Tunon. Maybe you can get them to be more loyal to you than to Tunon? We could also try to drive a wedge between the Earthshakers and the Disfavored. The Disfavored are Titus family, but the Earthshakers are married in family? They were followers of Cairn and got adopted in.
You are right to call the Disfavored a family. We are far more than mere countrymen, and the strength of our legion is in the love we bear towards each other. Ever since the betrayal of Cairn, we have been less trusting of our arcane allies. The Earthshakers are a fickle academic bunch. Their principles align with their ambition, not the hopes of the North.
If we can steal those mages out from under the Disfavored, so much the better. Or I wouldn't turn down the help of mages.
Nor should you. They may be deceitful and challenging to manage, but they have served the Iron Legion well in the past.
So if these Archon-less mages could be persuaded to rally to us, we'd tip things in our favor. Easier said than done, of course.
Of those, what do you suggest first?
The Bronze Brotherhood of Lethian's Crossing aren't necessarily good company, but at least it'll be quick and easy to find out where we stand with them. We can afford them or not. They'll take a contract or not.
That's all I need to know. The Disfavored, the Scarlet Chorus, all of the Overlord's minions will fall. Or at least is something you would say if you had a pretty high opinion of yourself, but I don't think we really have a chance against Kairos unless there's some kind of a trick that would dismantle his power, like a loophole in Kairos himself, much as there are loopholes in the edicts. But all of the Overlord's minions will fall.
Aren't you a feisty one? Where was this hate for Kairos' lackeys a few years ago? You seem so very eager to turn on your old allies. But I'm not one to criticize. I think it's wise to lean into the winds of change.
I'm improvising. Any suggestions?
My first suggestion would be to build a boat. Something durable, and take our chances on the high seas far from Kairos. I have a second and more practical suggestion. Look to the horizon and slightly up. By that I mean the other spires. We should see what's atop the others. Otherwise someone else might look first.
What do you know about the spires?
Not nearly enough, apparently. To me, they've always been axioms of navigation. You can triangulate a lot of things with the sextant and a clear view to a spire or two. We've long known the spires radiate strong magical fields, and all save the mountain spire connect to the old walls. So it's the sort of thing common folk know from afar, but avoid day to day.
I guess I should... Well, to be honest, I would like it to be worded more... I could speak to Tunon. I don't think this is as wise an idea as the game think it is, but it's definitely pushing me in this direction. I should speak with Tunon.
I would counsel you to do just that. I'm sure the events of Vendrian's Well are best explained from your mouth to Tunon's ears. Furthermore, I'd guess the Archon of Justice would want to know your take on the Archons and their divide.
That's all I have for now.
Well, short of Tunon giving you orders on pain of death, you have the luxury of acting on your own volition. Though the disfavored are likely to come for you. Whatever you decide, I'm at your disposal.
Your assistance will be most helpful, thanks.
And I am thankful to not be a bloody pile of offal in Vendrian's Well. Life under your banner will, I'm sure, prove most interesting.
Let us speak further.
What is it you need?
We should discuss matters at hand.
I'm still amazed we survived the Edict of Execution. The Chorus may outnumber us, and the disfavored seem to grow more aggressive every passing span. But we've endured our neap days. The struggle now turns in our favor.
I need more allies amongst the Tearsmen. Where should I look?
The classic option for a land war in the Tiers is hiring Free City's mercenaries. If you think you could convince the Forgebound of Lethian's Crossing to back your neutral side of the war, we could redirect their iron away from the enemy and to our allies instead. The idea I was pitching to the Vendrian Guard. There's also the slim chance we can drive a wedge between the disfavored and their mage allies, if we really want to hate ourselves in the morning. And while I don't endorse this, I must list all the options. Ask away.
I'd like to ask you about our travel companions. She nods, silently awaiting your follow-up. What do you make of Barrick?
My one concern with Barrick is that he's still loyal to Graven Ash, and not to you. Barrick seems steadfast, faithful, and dependable. But if it comes down to you versus Graven Ash, therein lies the test.
If it weren't a tactical asset, it would be fun to try and pry him out of that suit, cautious to see if his midsection is as strong, firm and taut as I've imagined it should be. Wait, so she finds him attractive as well, which is interesting to me because he's wearing shit-stained armor. You know, to me that's quite a turn-off. What are your thoughts on Verse?
We should consider ourselves fortunate that one of the most deadly members of the Scarlet Furies considers you a suitable gang leader. That said, I think her involvement with you is entirely suspect. I would wager good money the voices of Naratis listening through her, or perhaps seeing what she sees.
What's your take on Lantry?
Probably the only word thief I haven't wanted to dismember. Him? I'd merely play with an ice knife.
The Wandering Scholars thing seems an act. It's always an act with the sages, always pretending to know less than they really do, and I'm sure he's got 1,000 reasons for why he's not like them, or more trustworthy than the rest, but I know his type, and so I don't trust him. Oh, that's high praise coming from you. I'm going to take this staff and repeatedly jam it into your backside until you prolapse. Just like that, the balance is restored to all known existence. You had me worried there.
Ask away.
What do you know of the Arcane Society?
I know a great deal of the mages of the Tiers, or at least their history. Most are dead now. I know a little less about the guilds sworn to Kairos as Archons, but I try to make an effort to know my opposition.
Tell me of the Earthshakers. The Earthshakers are the disciples of Cairn, Archon of Stone, and they share their master's commands of tremors and soil, and they also share Cairn's aloof, brooding temperament. From what I gather, the Earthshakers serve the disfavored, but the relationship has been deeply strained by Cairn's fall from grace. I could imagine there's the fear Cairn shared with them, something subversive or treasonous. Tell me about the Blood Chanters. The Blood Chanters are the voices of Nerat's cabal of mages. Their magic is taken from the sigil of Sirin, and from techniques stolen from the School of Wild Wrath, namely their magic of fire, as learned from the Thousand Embers, the Archon of Fire. They barely qualify as a proper magic school or guild, and most of them barely literate, and I bet most of them didn't learn a damn thing, just had their knowledge shoved into their head by Nerat. They have all the brutal buffoonery of the chorus, but with magic to make their bloodlust contagious. Their only redeeming feature, I guess they make sages seem not half bad. What can you tell me of the Forgebound? The Forgebound have an unusual form of magic. They specialize in slow, painstaking rituals that do not produce the dazzling blasts of energy and shards of flying ice like my own magic. Instead, their spells render them immune to the fires of the forge, and at one with their tools of trade. I admit a bit of fascination with the guild. I much prefer the power and brutality of my own magic, but if I lived in a calmer, wiser time, I think there could be great satisfaction in using magic to become the master of one's craft. Tell me about the School of Ink and Quill. Behind the Tidecasters, the Sages are the second oldest arcane institution in the Tiers. We go back a ways, and there's a lot of bad blood. If I'm being objective, the sages claim to be scholars interested in collecting, archiving, and preserving lore from and for all humanity. They are quite keen to gather lore, but in no sense do they seek to share their knowledge with the rest of the Tiersmen. Many of our secrets have been pilfered by sages' spies over the centuries, and we're not alone. The sages have the secrets of many other guilds. Their generations of theft have made them versatile and dangerous. Tell me about your own guild, the School of the Tides. Our patron, occulted Jade, the Archon of Tides, is as old as the settlers of the Five Wives, and for nearly 5 centuries we were masters of the coast and the rivers. These days is a school of one, and you're looking at it. She thumbs her chest with a bemused smirk. Occulted Jade, the Archon of Tides, is the founder of the School of the Tides, as well as its only ruler. Though she wore the title Archon, Occulted Jade never bowed to Kairos, though many have tried to compel her to do so. Having arrived with the settlers that made up the landfall at Five Wives, she is perhaps the oldest known living Tiersman, capable of manipulating the oceans, the moons, and all the transitory forms of water. Occulted Jade used her magic to form a cabal of seafaring traders, musicians, and academicians, and it was the dedication to the arts that helped the school to endure, for by teaching these trades to children of noble families, the school remained in the good graces of the realms. By being able to control most anything cyclical and fluid, Occulted Jade has lived for centuries and could still be alive today, but none know with certainty. In the years before conquest, the School of the Tide discovered the Overlord's plan to invade, despite all assumptions that the Tier's resident Archon would defend her school and home. To the surprise of everyone, she vanished across the seas, taking nearly the entire School of the Tides with her into exile across uncharted waters. Oldest the Five Wives? By all accounts, Occulted Jade was among the initial settlers that made landfall at the Tiers before Kairos first cast an edict. Though she's a bit old and stooped, She looked amazing for nearly 500. Why didn't your Archon fight in the war? About a year or so before the troops arrived in the Bastard Tier, occulted Jade proclaimed the age of the Tiers was over and said she would depart southwest into unknown and unending ocean rather than face Kairos. Most of my guildsmen went along, choosing to risk the endless high seas rather than risk battle. A few of us, the militants, as our peaceful brethren dubbed us, chose to stand and fight. To my knowledge, I am the last of those who decided to stay. Well, there were other questions to be asked about the School of the Tides. What was the school like before the war? There was a time when the Tidecasters were the most powerful guild of the Tiers. The Kingdom of Haven accepted us as defenders of sea trade, and noble houses gave us peace and quiet in exchange for teaching their sons and daughters music, writing, and navigation. Though the other schools coveted our knowledge, they feared our wrath. Between our destructive magic and our Archon patron, others knew that attacking us meant suicide. How did the school fall? The Archon Cairn issued a challenge, and the Masters Holvax, Hagrivar, and Camberil leapt at the chance. I told them it was a hopeless clash. I think they were ready to die. I know the voices of Nerat would have wanted his hands on our practitioners, so I thank you again for giving my mentors death with dignity. To think of them living in torment trapped in that thing. As the youngest Tidecaster still in the Tiers, I exercised the better part of valor and went into hiding, but then my sense of shame kicked in, and well, that's about when I fell in with the Vengeant Guard.
I know a great deal of the mages of the Tiers, or at least their history. Most are dead now. I know a little less about the guilds sworn to Kairos' Archons, but I try to make an effort to know my opposition.
What of other magical schools and guilds of the Tiers? There have been several to crop up and wither across centuries. The Cutter's Guild took their healing magic north centuries ago. The School of Flowering Winter always limped along as an inconsequential group of gardeners.
Ask away.
What can you tell me of the Archons in the Tiers?
Not entirely sure. Which is to say, there was a time I studied my enemy in great detail, but I've recently come to learn that much of my information was little more than lies and misdirection.
Ebb scowls, pausing to scratch her ear. What of the voices of Nerat? The Archon of Secret lives up to his name. If he weren't so loathsome a beast, I would half admire his mastery of magical arms. They say he knows all the sigils lost to history, but I've also heard it said that stolen knowledge is why he speaks in different voices. But in truth, I'm learning that most of what I know is just lies. Okay, this repeats. What do you know of Graven Asher? Before the conquest, I assumed Graven Asher is an harmless old man, an Archon in name only past his prime. I could have not been more wrong. Many have underestimated the great general by his age. Few of them have made the mistake twice. Asher is a remarkable general. He's led the tiny band of disfavored on a nearly unstoppable rampage in the Tiers, and he does not seem to win wars with obvious displays of mystic powers, but with old-fashioned leadership and good soldiers. A year or so back, under a blue flag with a commander, I was told that the Archon knows the name of every soldier under his command, living and dead. The way the disfavored speak of Asher, you would think he raised each of them from the cradle. Known anything of Cairn? Enough. She inhales sharply, folding her arms with a scowl. The Tidecasters fought well, and can be proud of that. The sad truth is that we were doomed. Folvax and Hagrivar were old men. They wanted to go out in a blaze of glory. At least Cairn gave those old coots the send-off they wanted. The now defunct School of the Tides was largely conquered before any troops crossed the gates of judgment, with much of the school learning of Kairos' intended conquest and opting to flee, and take their chances across the unknown expanse of the ocean west of the Tiers. The last of the Tidecasters joined with the defenders of Apex, clashing with Kairos' forces in 429. When the generals could not decide on how to best deal with those water mages, you broke the deadlock, pushing for the disfavored plan to have Cairn, the Archon of Stone, meet the Tidecasters in battle. Largely immune to drowning, freezing, and most things in general, Cairn single-handedly bested the remaining elders in a decisive victory for Kairos' forces. The Scarlet Chorus cried foul, insisting that the Tidecasters have knowledge that would be lost by mere slaughter, and thus they ought to have been given unto the Archon of Secrets. There's clearly a story here. I'd like to hear it. A few years back, the remaining elder Tidecasters met Cairn in battle, tall as 10 men and all but invincible, and I thought nothing could stop us if we stood together. Whatever, it's old history. Well, I'm glad you lived through it all. I'm not, and I don't need your pity. Let's speak of other things. What do you know of Sirin? I'm sure there may be a younger Archon in the historical records, but Sirin is certainly an unusually powerful child. It is said half of the Scarlet Chorus was recruited by Sirin's persuasive song, and I do not doubt it. I also know the voices of Nerat put a shackle on her power, probably feared she would become the favorite of the rabble. That's her helmet, right? She wanted to have it removed? But I didn't do it. Which makes me wonder if I could. I doubt it. Like, you know, I doubt the others around in the camp would have let me do it. If it's really something that's kept on her like a leash.
Ask away.
I have questions about the people of the Tiers.
We all know how to swim, and we all know how to fight. Most Northmen are lucky to make half that boast. What would you like to know?
I'm curious about the people of the Tiers. I think you'll find each of us thinks themselves as a child of Haven, as in my case, or a child of Azure, a child of Apex, or what have you, but I suppose we Tiersmen have our shared customs. The most treasured of those customs used to be the pride of being free of Kairos' rule. Do you have particular questions? When were the Tiers settled? Human settlers arrived over 400 years ago, displaced from a war between what is now Kairos' realms of Trevn and Fertile Sands. A flotilla of barely seaworthy rigs headed west across the high seas. Tiersmen will sometimes speak of the 5 wives. We use it to refer both to the first 5 settlements, where the colonists made landfall, as well to the 5 matriarchs that went on to form the ruling dynasties of the Tiers. Of course, I am leaving out the matter of the builders of the old walls. Who knows when they lived and why they are gone, but the old walls didn't just fall out of the sky. Why don't men own land or women ships? For centuries, it has been our way that the men own the ships, but the women own the harbors. Our customs don't truly prevent ownership, they limit inheritance. Lands pass to daughters, then sisters, then mothers and then aunts. Ships pass to sons and then brothers and then fathers and uncles. Okay, so to be honest, okay, but if they don't truly prevent ownership, then it seems to me if you're a powerful enough captain with a lot of plunder, you could just buy land. But then obviously it would go to your female relatives after your death. So it seems strange to the outsiders, but it makes sense to me. Men are blessed with wanderlust, and women with a sense of the permanent. Likewise, the captain of a ship can't pause to carry a child, and the men grow restless if left in place. In truth, the customs vary from place to place, and you'll find men with enough wealth to own land, and women with enough sway own ships. As is often the case, the nobles pick and choose the traditions. Why didn't the younger realms stand unified against Kairos? Are you trying to rub it in? Yes, the younger realms were defeated one at a time by the invaders. Maybe if I was the Queen of the Tears, that wouldn't have happened. I genuinely want to know your thoughts on the matter. You're being defensive over nothing. Opportunity. That's what killed us. Haven wanted to watch the Master Tier fall first. Apex was hoping Heaven would fall. Azure wanted Stalwart to be attacked first. Every realm of the Tiers had some interest in watching their neighbors fall first, so we all held back support until a year or so into the war. Too fucking late by then, squabbling idiots. Tiersmen live with a greater number of beastmen. What's that like? The beastmen of the Tiers are hardier and smarter than their kin elsewhere, and fortunately we have lived together in relative harmony for some time. Make no mistake, life is difficult for most beastmen in the Tiers, but compared to say how they are treated in the Northern Empire, I would like to think we Tiersmen are a bit more modern and forward-thinking, even if just a bit. But I suppose I also take an overly optimistic view of our beastly cousins. I find their clumsy honesty endearing, and while no human will say nice things about my cooking, no beastman has ever said anything bad about my worst dishes. What are the major resistors to Kairos' rule?
Kairos made swift work of the Tiers, destroying most of the great armies of the Younger Realms in a few short years of war. Of course, queens can be bowed, captains slain, but we are a proud people. I think Kairos will find the stubborn remnants of the Tiers hard to eradicate completely. Was there a particular group you wish to discuss?
Tell me about the Unbroken.
The Unbroken is the name of the military of the now fallen realm of Stalwart. Every citizen of Stalwart was trained to fight, and all were expected to answer the rallying cry of the Regents, the ruling small council of the realm. A decade ago, Stalwart was the ass end of jokes Tiersmen would tell each other. The people of Stalwart are obnoxiously proud of a long history of being invaded, but never losing. The disfavored put an end to their vaunted record of victory. The Unbroken still persist, albeit marginally so. The disfavored withdrew after the Edict of Storms began shredding the landscape. Their holdfast of Sentinel Stand Keep was never taken, and the citizen army, though scattered, could still be rallied.
Tell me about the Stonestalker tribe.
Kairos' war was disastrous to the human realm of Azure, but a stroke of good luck for the numerous beastmen that toiled in Azure's endless wheat fields. With the masters all dead, the serfs have been set free. The Stonestalkers are a tribe born from these newly freed beasts. I imagine they would never bow to Kairos or the Archons. Too many generations have been enslaved. I'd wager anything they'll die before they ever bow. Beastmen understand strength and leadership, but it's always in the concrete sense. I can't pretend to know how they think, but I could never imagine them accepting an absent Prima. A distant ruler they can't see or smell seems a bit too abstract.
Tell me about the Bronze Brotherhood.
The Bronze Brotherhood is one of the most feared and famous of the Free City mercenary companies. They serve the highest bidder, and during the war, that was Kairos. Most of the Brotherhood perished in the war, but a handful, the crew hired to work at Lethian's Crossing. They got to babysit the Forgebound and survived the last few years with minor losses. The band is too small to be a serious threat to the disfavored or the chorus, but they are scourge-worshipping berserks that will adopt any enemy for the right price. Maybe even Kairos.
Are there other remnants of the Younger Realms that could still rise against Kairos?
Several sages came to our aid during the Second Battle of Vendrian's Well. I at first thought they meant to kill me, but instead they put their lives on the line for us. They spoke of others in their guild braving the Edict of Fire to salvage lore from the burning library. Though I may find them untrustworthy, it must be said that the sages have a certain fearlessness toward the Overlord. Perhaps that could be kindled further.
Having been part of the surrender faction within the school, I'd concur with that point. I thought the Edict of Fire would finally kill their defiant streak. But no, the sages still refuse to bow. We can and should mind their passion.
Historically speaking, an alliance with the School of Ink and Quill is just asking to have your efforts stolen and your goals undermined. Mark my words, some things never change.
Would you rather they be our enemies?
Well, perhaps we can shove them in front of the enemy. And the ones that volunteered at Vendrian's Well weren't all bad.
What can you tell me about the different nations of the Tiers? Before Kairos came, Tiers were the younger realms. The Tiers were the younger realms, the Bastard Tier and the Free Cities. In about that order of prominence, we all trace our roots back to the Five Wives, though sometimes a bit of ancestral shoreline seems all that we have in common. Tell me about the younger realms. Haven, Azure, Apex and Stalwart have been the four major forces of the Tiers for the last 4 centuries. A few other dynasties have tried their hand, but all eventually were defeated or absorbed into the 4 we know today. Not sure when the term younger came into fashion, but it has always been a term of humble contrast. Just look at the old walls. Someone was here before us and built them. Don't really know anything about them, but it stands to reason that there used to be the older realms that did all of the construction. Before Kairos came... okay, this repeats. Tell me about the Bastard Tier. It's the northernmost of the Tiers, and the choke point to the Northern Empire. It has been a hub of trade for centuries, and a long line of merchant families and private armies have kept the realm largely lawless. Though many of us used to joke about the Bastard City being sacked by rabid dogs, Tunan's capture of the city was a terrible blow to the morale of the Tiersmen. We knew that day Kairos was more than just a fun story to scare your kids. What can you tell me about the Free Cities? There is little free about the Free Cities, save from your independence from the younger realms. They are not physically adjacent, but rather politically allied by their shared hatred of the other realms. Most of the Free Cities were defeated with little effort by Kairos' forces. Where I heard it, Nerat just had to have agents hire the mercenaries and order them to simply be elsewhere when the armies of the Overlord arrive.
Ask away.
Tell me about yourself. What would you like to know? Tell me about your name. When I was born, I was born Hazen Lavenia, but for most of my life, and I suppose for all the days after, I am known and will be known as Ebb, Tidecaster Ebb, for those trying to be obsequious? I don't know that word, actually. I might have to look it up. I've also probably used a bunch of aliases that are going to haunt me at some point. Hazen, didn't realize you were nobility. I know, I dress myself and I cook my own food, so misleading. My mother was a magistrate of Arden, my father was Admiralty. It's mostly meaningless now. Our lands are now the Overlords. How did you get the nickname? It's one of those not especially funny jokes that stuck for long past its season. I wrote the word ebb incorrectly on a written examination, and Master Folvak started calling me Ebb from then on. He claimed it fit me, said I was a cynical little shit that always sees the ebb, never the flow. Did you always want to be a Tidecaster? So when I was a little girl, what I really wanted to be was a marine. The burly bitch at the prow of a Tyranny, first to crack some skulls when the ship rammed, you know, an honest living. Fortunately, the school sought me out before I got myself killed at sea. And the School of the Tides was looking for new blood, and my father was the Admiral of Haven, so the school wanted me for the political connections. I got to spend my first couple of years proving I actually belonged with the Tidecasters. That was fun. What did you do in the years before the war? My husband was born in Apex, and he left his prosperous lands to be with me, so when the nest was empty, it seemed right we leave my homeland and see his side of the Tiers. We had a year and a bit to ourselves before the war upturned things. We saw all of Apex. I took him along my old sailing routes around the Five Wives and Sunder. Those were good times. Then came the war, and I learned I would be one of the last Tearsmen to live free of Kairos. Ever since then, I think Oathbreaker has technically been my chosen profession. Tell me about your family. Trying to salt old wounds. They are all gone, but if you really care to know, I had a husband, 3 kids, siblings I didn't hate. Every family has its troubles. I was lucky that awkward and stilted dinner banter was the worst of mine. Tell me about your husband. Pelox Aldenos and I were married in 410. Aldenos was a folksman for the Vengeance Guard back before they were starving partisans, and I saw him more as a carpenter. Woodworking was just a hobby of his, but all my fondest memories of him are trying to shape something, and me making stupid jokes about the firmness of his materials. What became of him? Or I assume he's related to Pelox Florian? Indeed, I am a sister-in-law to Florian, Travos, Tyrell, and an armada of cousins. The brothers were all close before the war. A shame they died so far from each other. What did you like about him? He fit my aunt's advice. If he makes you walk funny, he's a keeper. Despite, or maybe because, he was a warrior by trade, Aldenos got his anger... He fit my aunt's advice. If he makes you walk funny, he's a keeper. Despite, or maybe because, he was a warrior by trade, Aldenos got his anger out in practice and in war. He was peaceful as a frozen lake when we were together, and that fucker could cook. He could whet all my appetites. What became of him? He perished at the gates of judgment. I saw him die. I do not wish to discuss it, just know that I've made my peace with it, and I'm glad I was with him on the field of battle when his time came. I miss him, but I think it may have been for the best. Though he was a few years older than me, my studies left me always a bit younger than him. The difference grew with time. Aldenos was slowing down, and half figured the Gates of Judgment would be his last battle. If anything, he got exactly the death he wanted, so in that sense, I am very happy for him. Tell me about your children. And there were the twins, Drevenor and Lorama, and then my youngest son, Akamas. Aldenos wanted more, but I was nearing the end of my trials at the school, and dueling with little magic is a terrible idea when with child. Drevenor and Lorama followed my husband's trade and took to the folks. Alcamas liked the harp more than people, can't blame him one bit. I made sure my children could read, and I'm damn proud of the fact, probably the only thing I did right. What of the twins? They died at the gates of judgment, or at least Drevenor died, run through with a disfavored spear. Lorama was at the battle, but I don't know what became of her. My fear has been that she has been recruited by the Scarlet Chorus. Perhaps she has a new name, if she's still alive. What became of your youngest? Without Drevenor and Lorama, Akamas, well, he never quite... He took his own life in 430. Ebb shrugs, her eyes glancing far away. I should have put him on a triram and shoved him out into the high seas. He did not ask for birth, nor did I prepare him for the bitterness of life, for the bitterness the life would offer. I am very sorry for your loss. Spare me the sorrow. We've all lost family to Kairos. I just lost 2 in one battle, but even then, I'm hardly unique. What of the rest of your family? My family's haven folk through and through. My mother prided herself on being descended from the Hazen Rabban, one of the founding magistrates of the city of Ardent. She looks to the side, mouth twisting in thought. The sad thing is, they died during the conquest, but that's not how I lost contact. I lost contact because magic and travel became my life. Had plenty of time to get to know them as an adult, but I simply missed it. But that's my fault. I can't rightly blame Kairos for everything. Not so sure I believe any of this. You don't seem all that troubled.
Well, I'm an accomplished liar, but I've no need to spin a tale about any of this. My husband, most of my kids, my parents. Kairos' thugs took them all. If I don't seem broken up, it's because I'm not. I don't feel such things anymore.
You sign your magic with a great deal of anger.
I like to think of it more as well-refined rage. But amusing you noticed it all the same. Hate is akin to an acid, a poison of the heart that consumes most from within. And like any fluid, if you know how to hold it, you can apply it. It's a trick of the trade, I suppose. One's surges and dry spells of emotion are no different than the rhythms of the waves. There's a shared logic to taming both. Sadness, mania, rage. I suppose I have these things, but they're just humors in the blood to be pushed, needed, and restrained as the situation demands.
How did you fall in with the Vendran God? In the times past, folks of Apex would run us out of town if they saw two or more Tidecasters congregating, but war makes for strange bedfellows. To the Vendran Guard's credit, they knew they had to rely on their neighbors. I only wish more of us joined the cause, and sooner. It is my shame that many of my peers were cowards. If the whole school have met the enemy as a unified force, best not to overthink it. She waves her hand dismissively. Why were the Tidecasters so reluctant to fight? Too much navel gazing, not enough vitriol, or that's my guess. A century of relative peace and calm meant that we had become a guild of too many musicians and poets. If the people of Apex were so hostile, why come to their aid? Though the School of the Tides has no official claim to land, we consider Vendran Well to be something of a sacred realm. It's more than a landlocked circle of mountains. It's sort of a big bowl of peculiar waterways. Besides, my late husband was from Apex. I knew he would have joined with the Vendran Guard had he lived long enough, so I need to honor his passion and do this for him.
Ask away.
Let us speak of magic.
You know, I normally charge for this, but for you...
Ebb smiles awaiting your query. What can you tell me of your magical tradition?
Now, you know that's a very personal question. The knowledge I have is a centuries-old gift from the Archon of Tides. I would sooner discard my life than the sanctity of that gift. I will speak in generalities only.
Ask. The worst I can do is not tell you. Tell me about how you influenced Teratu's grave. A trade secret and not one I'm going to talk about. The School of the Tides dies with me, and so too will this, and don't bother trying to change my mind on this matter, it will get ugly quick. Tell me how you influence mist, ice, and other forms of water. With years of training, now look, most of those secrets have already been stolen ages ago by the sages. Doesn't mean I'm going to tell you just because the secret's already out, but it means you can go ask someone else if you really feel entitled to know. And before you ask, I've learned plenty of knowledge. I've learned plenty of the knowledge stolen by the sages, but no, I don't know how Ebb does what Ebb does, magically or otherwise. What are the philosophical teachings of your magic? That's a question I can answer. It would surprise you little to learn that we see all things, peoples, wars, seasons, to be cyclical, waxing and waning through their various forms, like the tides and the light of Teratu's grave. Teratus the planet has 2 satellites visible by the naked eye, the tide-locked Teratus Grave and the rapidly orbiting Interloper. Schools have long studied the effects of those 2 moons on the ocean currents, and a great deal of folklore concerns the origins of the moons. A common belief is that in Kairos' empire is that Teratus' grave will finally set on the horizon when Kairos' rule ends, whereas those of the Tears insist that the moons are older than the old wolves and will outlive even Kairos. The mind is limited. We're born and spend our lives dodging death. We expect all stories to have a beginning and an end. We assume all things start and stop just like us. In truth, all things are cycles, some by the matter of minutes, other by the matter of years or lifetimes. In the School of the Tides, we appreciate patterns of all sorts. Most are called to the depths. Other finds the interest skybound. Many find the tides of the human emotion and political fortunes far more intriguing than the inanimate tides found in orbits and oceans. From what Archon do the Tidecasters draw upon their magic? The first Tidecasters were given the gift of magic by the school's founder, the Archon of the Tides. Though she was not of Kairos' ilk, she was as powerful as any Archon, and her name and legacy, from her name and legacy we can mimic the moons pool on the seas, and change the currents. It's the first, and it's from her that we have the spells that turn the moon's pleasant hues into a baleful ray of searing gravelight. In all of those years I have not grown tired of the thrill of power. It's a rush of carnal humors every time. Gravelight is the magical term for the light of the moon of Teratus' grave, specifically when harnessed and manipulated for nefarious purposes. While the moon's rays are normally incapable of causing as much as a mild sunburst, or rather sunburn, the Tidecasters have long studied magic that can concentrate those rays into bolts and beams of searing doom. The Tidecasters have spent centuries trying to mimic and control the moon's tidal pool on the oceans, and will often mention that diverting moonlight is the easy stuff compared to pulling and pushing the tides, but the modern times have forced the school to concentrate on more martial applications of this magic. I'm guessing you can tell me more than I ever wanted to know about the moons. You may be right. My magic is generally associated with the moon Teratus' grave, but you have to know where Interloper is in the sky when mucking about with mystic forces. Teratus' grave is the big one, right? Tell me about it. Teratus' grave is fixed in the skies, always overhead day and night. It was first named by the folks living far to the east, though they would look west and see the moon like a permanent hill on the horizon, a grave where the sun dies each evening. That's how the older folks saw it. If you live by the western part of the world, Teratus' grave is overhead all the time. This means that day and night it's reflecting the sun's rays, and if you know what you're doing, it doesn't just reflect, it magnifies. Interloper is that one that moves in the sky, if I remember the lessons correctly. Exactly. Interloper orbits Teratus at a steady clip, and its orbit sometimes crosses the front of Teratus' grave, leading to great mystical calamity if you don't know what you're doing. Do you control water, or do you mimic the tidal effects of the moons that the moons have on water? Both, actually. I'm amused you're keen on the difference. Our spells of ice and mist affect water directly, but are of limited volume. Displacing your own body weight in water is a no mean feat. But if I were to move an ocean current, I would drive myself nuts moving water in front of a boat like a little at a time. That's where I use a cantrip to simulate a tidal pool. Have you heard anything from the Tidecasters that left before the war? No, and I don't like entertaining the hope. Those cowards are all gone. If they didn't die at sea, they are dead to me. I reserve the right to be pleasantly surprised if they come back, eager to fight the good fight, but I'm not holding my breath. All the brave Tidecaster died, present company accepted. Can you teach me what you know? I suppose I'm capable of it, but no. The secrets of the Archon of Tides die with me. I'm not going to force her to do it, and besides, I don't think she would have obeyed. We can talk other arcane matters.
You know, I normally charge for this, but for you...
Do you know anything of the magic of the Archons? Enough to know that I'm out of my element. That is to say, I've studied the many Archons a great deal, and I have a great number of hypotheses and conjectures, but I'm no expert yet. And like most who have invoked the Archons in the Archons of times past to work magic, I do wonder what the difference of birth and experience gives one to magical potential. What? And like most who have invoked the Archons of times past to work magic, I do wonder what difference of birth and experience gives one the magical potential to be an Archon. Most of my studies have been into the question of origins of form. It's known that we can emulate the magic of the Archons that came before us, but is it possible to tap into the magic of Archons yet to be? So far, the answer seems to be no. She looks at the ground with a rumpled smirk. Know anything about the old walls or the spires? Not enough, never enough. Eve smiles, twisting her staff in her hands. As a child, I was terrified of the old walls. I think that's true of most folk. Now that I can arc a gravelight with a wiggle of my fingers, well, I think when I'm a shriveled old hag, dying in the old walls would be a great way to go. What can you tell me of the Bane? What I know is largely taken from Master Camberl's work and some near-fatal experience venturing close to the old walls. At best, as I understand it, the Banes are the bits of magical will that have extended life of their own. I am of the belief that they nest or reproduce in the old walls, the only place you can regularly find them. Our magic attracts the Bane. That much I know to be true firsthand. Again, this is personal theory, but I'm guessing they eat or drink magic, so our spells are invitation to dine.
Ask away.
Let's talk of something else.
What is it you need?
Is it all? Ebb nods at you as you approach and offers a curt bow.
What is it you need?
Okay, that's enough for now. Wow. Wow. That's definitely... that's a lot of talking. You know, this episode is way too long, but I wanted to have all of the companion talk to be done for now. And I guess it is. So, yeah, that's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.